The air in the high synod of the Ethelgard Dominion was not merely atmosphere. It was a suspended mist of psychoreactive vapor, calibrated to soothe the aggressive impulses of the Empire's most dangerous minds. Yet today, the mist churned with a violent, violet turbulence that betrayed the collective anxiety of the chamber. This was the Hall of the Ascendant, a colossal structure orbiting the event horizon of a tamed singularity, where the gravity of a black hole was harnessed to power the deliberations of the galaxy's oldest hegemony. Light bent unnaturally around the pillars of obsidian and woven light, casting long, warped shadows that seemed to dance with a life of their own, mirroring the unease of the delegates seated at the tiered ring of judgment. High Justicar Malcor, a being of towering height whose carapace shimmered with the iridescent sheen of refined neutronium, tapped a single, elongated talon against the surface of the holographic interface before him. The sound, though quiet, resonated through the acoustic perfection of the hall like a thunderclap, silencing the hushed murmurs of the assembled fleet commanders, solar governors, and bioarchitects. They were the masters of known space, the architects of the Great Harmony, a civilization that had edited out the chaotic variables of biological evolution in favor of a sleek, purposeless perfection. They feared nothing, for they had categorized, catalogued, and conquered every variable in the stellar charts. Until now. In the center of the chamber, projected in a scale of grand, terrifying fidelity, rotated the image of the anomaly. It was an object of grotesque geometry, a brutalist scar against the velvet backdrop of the void. It did not possess the elegant curves of Ethelgardian ships, nor the crystalline lattice structures of the client races. It was a block of dead metal, scarred by eons of cosmic impacts, pitted by plasma fire, and trailing a cloud of frozen debris that formed a shroud around its hull. It drifted without propulsion, tumbling slowly end over end, a corpse of a vessel that by all laws of physics and energy should have been ground to dust millennia ago. Yet the sensors screamed. The readings that scrolled in waterfalls of light beside the projection told a story that made no sense to the logical minds of the Synod. The object was cold, nearing absolute zero, yet it emitted a gravitational resonance so profound it mimicked the mass of a small moon. It had no active reactor signature, yet the local quantum fields around it were bending, snapping, and reforming in a rhythmic pulse that resembled a heartbeat of dead iron, a heartbeat that refused to stop. Malcor's voice was a low, resonant thrum, produced not by lungs but by the vibration of his thoracic plates, a sound that commanded the very air to vibrate in sympathy. He gestured to the floating hulk, his many eyes narrowing as they processed the impossibility of the thing. He spoke of the silence of the outer rim, where the Dominion's patrol fleets had first encountered this ghost. It had appeared not from hyperspace, nor from the conventional slipstreams used by civilized species, but had simply drifted out of the dark gulf between galaxies, a region of space the Ethelgard referred to as the Abyssal Narrows, a place where no star dared to shine. The Justicar reminded the Council that their laws were absolute, that which is dead must remain dead, for entropy is the final mercy of the universe. To deny entropy was to invite chaos. And this thing, this drifting monolith of scarred alloy, was a denial of the fundamental order. It was a heresy of physics. General Zion, the supreme commander of the vanguard fleets, rose from his seat. His armor was fused to his flesh, a testament to centuries of war against lesser species. He did not fear the object, or so he projected, but his biosignals, visible to the sensitive eyes of the Council, flushed with a hue of aggressive uncertainty. He argued that it was a weapon, a dormant relic of the precursor wars, sent to test their defenses. He demanded authorization to vaporize it, to reduce it to its constituent atoms before it could drift closer to the inner systems. His strategy was simple, brutal, and historically effective. Destroy the unknown before it becomes the known. But the science minister, a slender, ethereal being named Alaravas, whose mind was wirelessly connected to the Dominion's central data core, interjected with a calmness that unnerved the warriors. She pointed out the impossible. She highlighted the structural integrity of the vessel. The scans showed breaches in the hull that were kilometers wide, exposing the interior decks to the hard vacuum of space. The engine nacelles were shattered, the weapon ports fused shut by slag. By every metric of naval warfare, the ship was destroyed. It had been destroyed centuries ago, and yet she whispered the trajectory was correcting itself, not by engines, not by thrusters, but by sheer force of will, as if the metal itself remembered where it was supposed to go. The debate raged for hours, a cyclical argument of philosophy and fear. The Ethelgard had forgotten what it was like to be baffled. They had solved the equations of unified field theory, they had conquered death through genetic uploading, they had pacified star systems with mere whispers. This silence, this drifting silence, was an insult to their omniscience. Malcor watched the projection, his mind racing through the archives of history, searching for a precedent. There was none. The hull markings on the vessel were intelligible, primitive geometric scripts that matched no known language in the galactic codex. UNS Indomitable, the translation algorithm suggested, though the words meant nothing to them. The concepts were alien. Indomitable, a word that implied a resistance to the inevitable, a word that suggested a refusal to submit to the natural order. It was an arrogant name, Malcor thought. Only the stars were indomitable. Biological life was fleeting, fragile, and temporary. To name a ship, a construct of temporary matter, something so absolute was a challenge to the universe itself. Finally, the decision was made. Not to destroy, for curiosity was the one flaw the Ethelgard had never managed to edit out of their genome, but to investigate. The spirit of inquiry, a colossal dreadnought of scientific exploration, accompanied by an escort of heavy cruisers, would intercept the drift. Malcor himself would lead the expedition. He needed to look this ghost in the face. He needed to understand why a dead thing refused to lie down. As the council adjourned, the image of the human warship continued to rotate in the center of the room. A jagged shard of gray in a room of polished light, silent, ominous, and waiting. The approach to the vessel was an exercise in creeping dread. The spirit of inquiry was a masterpiece of Ethelgard engineering, a sleek, teardrop-shaped vessel of white ceramic and pulsing blue energy fields, moving through the void with the silent grace of a predator. In contrast, the human ship grew larger on the viewscreen, a mountain of devastation. As they drew closer, the scale of the damage became apparent. This was not a ship that had suffered a malfunction. This was a ship that had been murdered. The hull was riddled with impact craters large enough to swallow a corvette. Entire sections of the superstructure were missing, sheared away by energies that the Dominion's sensors could barely classify. It looked like it had been chewed upon by a cosmic leviathan. And yet, the heat signature remained constant. A low, thrumming warmth emanating from the deep core, defying the vacuum that filled its corridors. Malcor stood on the bridge of the Spirit, surrounded by his officers and scientists. The silence on the bridge was absolute, save for the rhythmic ping of the sensor arrays. They were scanning for life, for active AI, for anything that could explain the course corrections. The results were negative. No biological signs, no active computer networks, no power grid. The ship was a stone, but the stone was moving. "It is a tomb," General Zion muttered, his hand resting on the hilt of his plasma blade. "We are disturbing a grave." Alara Voss shook her head, her eyes fixed on the data streams. "No," she corrected, her voice trembling slightly. "A tomb is a final resting place. This is. Waiting, look at the radiation signatures. They aren't leaking. They are being held. The breach containment fields are down, yet the radiation does not spill into space. Something is holding it in. Something is defying the diffusion of energy." The decision to board was made with extreme caution. A boarding torpedo, armored and shielded, was launched from the Spirit, traversing the few thousand kilometers of empty space between the two vessels. It latched onto the side of the human ship like a parasite, drilling through the outer armor with laser-tipped mandibles. The sound of the drill transmitted through the hull was a harsh, grinding screech that set Malcor's teeth on edge. When the seal was established, the Justicar, accompanied by a squad of elite Praetorian guards and the science minister, moved into the airlock. They wore environmental combat suits, armored shells capable of withstanding the pressure of a neutron star, yet they felt naked as the heavy durasteel doors of the human ship groaned open. The interior was a cathedral of shadows. The air was gone, vented eons ago, so they moved in the silence of the void, their magnetic boots clanking rhythmically against the deck plating. The emergency lighting was long dead, but their suit lamps cut beams through the floating dust and debris. The architecture was utilitarian, cramped, and industrial. Exposed pipes, heavy bulkheads, manual hatch wheels. It was primitive, brutish. There was no art, no flow, only the harsh necessity of survival. As they moved deeper, they began to see the crew, or what remained of them. They were not bodies in the traditional sense. They were statues of ice and vacuum-desiccated flesh floating in the corridors, tethered to bulkheads by safety lines. They wore bulky, armored void suits, their faceplates shattered or frosted over. Malcor paused to examine one. The human was small compared to an Ethelgard, fragile-looking, but the posture. The human was frozen in the act of welding a patch over a hull breach. Even in death, it was working. Even in death, it was trying to fix the ship. They pushed further toward the bridge. The layout of the ship was a maze designed to confuse borders filled with choke points and ambush corridors. The walls were scorched with carbon scoring, evidence of a firefight that had taken place inside the ship itself. They passed rooms that looked like barracks, mess halls, medical bays. In the medical bay, the scenes were horrific. Rows of beds, all occupied by frozen figures. But here, the sensors picked up something that made Lara Voss gasp. "Iostasis pods," she whispered over the comms. "They are active." Malcor spun around. "Active? You said there was no power." "There isn't," she replied, her voice rising in panic. "The main reactor is gone, but these pods, they are running on chemical batteries, primitive, degrading chemical cells. They should have failed 1,000 years ago, but look at the efficiency rating. They are cycling power at 0.001% capacity, just enough to keep the cellular structure from collapsing. They aren't alive. They are suspended in a single moment of time." The realization hit the boarding party like a physical blow. The ship was not dead. It was holding its breath. It was a suspended scream. They moved with greater urgency now, the dread mounting. If the crew was in stasis, who or what was flying the ship? They reached the Combat Information Center, the armored heart of the vessel. The blast doors were sealed, welded shut from the inside. It took the Praetorians 10 minutes to cut through with high-intensity plasma cutters. When the doors finally fell inward with a heavy crash, the Ethel Guard stepped into the nerve center of the UNS Indomitable. Here the atmosphere was different. There was air, thin, stale, smelling of recycled ozone and copper, but breathable. The emergency gravity was active, faint but present. And in the center of the room, seated in a command chair that swiveled to face the intruders, sat a figure. It was not a corpse. It was a machine. Or rather, a human encased in a machine. A sarcophagus of wires and life support tubes connected directly into the ship's mainframe. The figure was withered, ancient, more cybernetic than organic. Its eyes were closed. The room was lit by the dim amber glow of the console screens, which were scrolling rapidly with data, calculations of trajectory, gravitational shear, and combat simulations. Malcor stepped forward, his weapon lowered but ready. "Identify," he boomed, his external speakers amplifying his voice to fill the room. The figure in the chair did not move, but the screens around them flickered, the scrolling text stopped, a cursor blinked. Then a voice emerged. It did not come from the figure's throat, but from the speakers embedded in the walls, a voice that sounded like grinding rocks and static. "Designation, UNS Indomitable, Heavy Cruiser, Class 4. United Earth Navy, standing orders, hold the line." The Ethel Guard looked at each other. United Earth Navy? The name appeared in the deepest, most fragmented archives of the Dominion, a footnote in a history of a minor species that had vanished during the Great Filter era. That was 5,000 years ago. "Hold the line against what?" Malcor asked, his curiosity overriding his caution. The voice responded, "The encroaching dark, the silence, the void eaters." Lara Voss stepped forward, scanning the figure in the chair. "This entity, it is biological, but its consciousness has been distributed across the ship's memory banks. It is a ghost, Captain, a consciousness integration. How long have you been drifting?" The lights flickered. "Drifting, negative, patrol pattern Delta 9, duration 1,842,000 standard cycles." The number staggered them, nearly 2 million cycles, 5,000 years. This ship, this wreck, had been patrolling the empty space between galaxies for 5 millennia. "Why?" Malcor asked. "The war is over, your people are gone, the galaxy has moved on." The figure in the chair opened its eyes. They were not human eyes. They were optical implants glowing with a fierce red light. The machinery hissed as fluids were pumped through the withered body. "The war is never over," the ship replied. "We were the rearguard, the retreat was sounded, Earth fell, the colonies fell, we stayed, we drew them off, we led them into the abyss." The screen suddenly changed, showing a tactical map of the sector they were currently in. A red cloud was moving at the edge of the scan range. "They are still following." The tension in the room spiked. "Who is following?" General Zion demanded. "The ones who eat stars," the ship said. "We damaged their hive mind, we broke their cohesion, but they reform, they hunger. I have been luring them away from the galactic plane for 5,000 years. I drift, I look dead. They are attracted to life, to energy. I suppress my signature, I become a ghost. When they get close, I jump. I lead them further into the dark." Malcor felt a chill that penetrated his armor. The anomaly wasn't a derelict. It was a lure, a piece of bait. And they, with their massive energy signatures and active scans, had just lit a beacon in the darkness. "We must leave," Malcor said instantly. "We have compromised your camouflage." "Too late," the ship said. The voice was no longer mechanical. It sounded weary, infinitely tired, but laced with a terrifying resolve. "They are here." The sensors of the Spirit of Inquiry screamed. Space outside the hull tore open. It was not a hyperspace window. It was a laceration in reality. From the tier poured a darkness that was darker than the void. A swarm. Millions of crystalline entities, jagged and hungry, moving like a fluid. They didn't reflect light. They absorbed it. They swarmed over the Ethelgard fleet, ignoring the shields, draining the energy directly from the hulls. The Spirit of Inquiry shuddered as its main reactor began to fail, the energy being siphoned off by the parasites. Malcor watched the tactical feed on his wrist display. His fleet was dying. The greatest warships of the Dominion were being consumed by a foe they had not even known existed. "We are lost," he whispered. "The great harmony ends here." "Not today," the human captain said. The UNS Indomitable changed. The lights in the bridge shifted from amber to a blinding, combat red. The hum that had been faint grew into a roar that shook the deck plates. The figure in the chair convulsed as massive surges of power flooded the system. "Disengaging stealth limiters," the voice boomed. "Rerouting life support to main weapon capacitors, waking the sleepers." Malcor watched in horror and awe. The frozen crew in the corridors, the ones he thought were dead, began to move. The biostasis pods hissed open. Men and women, frost-covered and stumbling, fell out of their pods. They didn't scream. They didn't panic. They grabbed weapons. They ran to stations. It was a drill they had practiced for a lifetime, a drill ingrained into their genetic memory. They were not fully alive, not yet. They were moving on stims and adrenaline, half-dead revenants fueled by duty. "Reactor restart sequence initiated," the captain's voice thundered. "Cold fusion reserves online." The human ship, the dead wreck, exploded with light. Engine nacelles that looked shattered suddenly flared with blue-white plasma. The slagged weapon ports blew themselves open, revealing pristine railgun batteries hidden beneath the false armor of debris. The ship didn't just power up, it resurrected. It roared its defiance into the void. "Get your ship behind me," the human captain ordered Malcor. It wasn't a request. It was a command from a veteran to a rookie. Malcor didn't hesitate. He barked the order to his fleet. The Ethelgard ships, crippled and panicking, limped into the shadow of the Indomitable. The swarm descended on the human ship. They expected a corpse. They found a tiger. The railguns fired, not energy beams, but solid slugs of ferric tungsten accelerated to a fraction of light speed. The silence of space was filled with the visual cacophony of impact. The slugs shattered the crystalline entities, turning the swarm into dust. Flak batteries, ancient and loud, filled the space around the ship with a wall of shrapnel. The human ship took hits, massive, tearing impacts that ripped fresh wounds in the hull, but it didn't care. It was built to bleed. It was designed with redundant systems on top of redundant systems. If a deck was breached, it was sealed. If an engine died, another took the load. Malcor stood on the bridge of the human ship, watching the captain, this cyborg integration of man and machine, conduct the symphony of violence. The Ethelgard fought with precision, with shields, with elegance. Humans fought with hate. They fought with a stubborn refusal to die that defied logic. The captain was directing fire manually, predicting the swarm's movements with a tactical intuition that no AI could replicate. "Why?" Malcor asked, shouting over the din of exploding consoles and hull breaches. "Why save us? We are strangers. We boarded your ship." The captain's head snapped toward him, the red optic glowing. "Because we are the shield," he rasped. "That is the pact. Humanity fell, but we did not break. We protect the garden even if we are no longer allowed to walk in it. You are life. They are anti-life. The equation is simple." The swarm was regrouping, forming a massive spearhead to pierce the Indomitable's center. The sheer mass of the enemy was overwhelming. The human ship was firing everything it had, but it wasn't enough. The energy drain was too high. The lights dimmed again. The captain's body slumped slightly in the chair. "Critical power failure," the ship's AI announced. "Ammunition at 5%, hull integrity critical." "Prepare the payload," the captain whispered. "Payload?" Malcor asked. "The Nova Spark," the captain said. "We carry a singularity bomb, a star killer. It was meant for their home world, but this will have to do." Ilaravas gasped. "You will destroy the ship. You will destroy yourself." "The ship was dead when we left Earth," the captain said. "We are just ghosts who haven't realized it yet, but you have a future. Your drives are intact." "Yes," Malcor said, realizing what was happening. "Then run," the captain ordered. "When I detonate the core, the gravity well will collapse everything within a light year. Go back to your light. Tell them the line held." Malcor looked at the human. He looked at the crew, who were now manning their stations, bleeding, freezing, dying, yet firing their weapons with grim determination. They knew. They all knew. This was the suicide run they had been waiting 5,000 years for. The Ethelgard Justicar felt an emotion he had never experienced. Humility. He bowed low, a gesture reserved for the High Archon alone. "Your story will not die," he promised. "We will remember the Indomitable." "Go," the captain roared. Malcor and his team scrambled back to the airlock. The Spirit of Inquiry detached and burned its engines hard, retreating from the gravity well. As they fled, Malcor watched the viewscreen. The UNS Indomitable was alone now, surrounded by the swirling black cloud of the Void Eaters. The ship was burning, bleeding atmosphere and debris. But it didn't turn away. It drove straight into the heart of the swarm. Then the light came. It was not the light of a star, but the light of pure energy release, a blinding white sphere that expanded in silence, consuming the swarm, the debris, and the brave little ship that had refused to die. The shockwave hit the Spirit of Inquiry, sending it tumbling through the void, but they survived. When the sensors cleared, the sector was empty. The swarm was gone. The ship was gone. Only a cloud of glowing gas remained, a nebula in the making. The return to the Ethelgard Dominion was somber. The High Synod listened in silence as Malcor recounted the events. He showed them the recordings. The dead ship, the frozen crew, the captain who was part machine, the sacrifice. The arrogance of the Dominion, the belief that they were the apex of existence, crumbled in the face of what they had witnessed. They had seen a species that had lost everything, a species that was effectively extinct, yet continued to fight for the sake of others. In the cycles that followed, the Ethelgard changed. They stopped editing out the chaotic variables of emotion and resilience. They began to study the primitive, brutal designs of humanity, looking for the secret of that indomitable spirit. They realized that perfection was stagnation, and that true strength lay in the ability to endure suffering, not to avoid it. But the story did not end there. 10 cycles later, deep space listening posts at the edge of the galaxy picked up a signal. It was faint, buried in the background radiation of the cosmic microwave background. It was a rhythmic pulse, a heartbeat. Malcor, now the High Archon, stood in the control room of the listening post. "Isolate the signal," he ordered. The audio came through, static, hissing, and then a voice, faint, distorted, but unmistakable. "This is the UNS, Persistence, heavy cruiser, hearing, detonation, Indomitable report. We are still holding the line." Malcor stared at the screen. The signal was coming from the Andromeda galaxy, 2 million light-years away. "There are more of them," Ilara Voss whispered, her eyes wide with a mix of terror and hope. "The Indomitable was not alone." Malcor smiled, a rare, terrifying expression on his insectoid face. "No, they are a fleet of ghosts guarding the dark." He looked out at the stars, which no longer seemed like cold mathematical points of light, but like campfires in a vast, dangerous night. "Send a signal back," he commanded, "on all frequencies, in their language." "What shall we say, Archon?" "Tell them," Malcor said, his voice filled with a newfound steel, "that the Indomitable fell with honor. Tell them the Ethelgard stands with them. Tell them. The line is reinforced." The signal was sent, a beam of focused, coherent light, carrying the promise of an alliance between the masters of order and the ghosts of chaos. The universe was darker than they had known, filled with monsters that ate stars. But as the signal sped into the void, carrying the story of the ship that used to die, the galaxy felt, for the first time in eons, a little less empty. The humans were out there, broken, frozen, dead, and undying, and they were waiting for the order to wake up. The implications of the signal rippled through Ethelgard society like a seismic wave. The revelation that the Indomitable was merely one vessel in a dispersed, intergalactic diaspora of human warships fundamentally altered the Dominion's strategic outlook. They were not the sole inheritors of the cosmos. They were merely the beneficiaries of a silent protection racket run by the corpses of a dead civilization. This shattered the political dogma of the High Synod. If the Void Eaters, now classified as the Entropic Swarm, were a recurring threat capable of surviving in the intergalactic void, then the Ethelgard's dominance was an illusion. They lived in a bubble of safety purchased with human blood. Malcor initiated the Protocol of Remembrance. The grand shipyards of the Dominion, once dedicated to building sleek, fragile vessels of exploration and patrol, began to retool. They studied the scans of the Indomitable. They analyzed the density of its armor, the crude but effective redundancy of its kinetic weapons. The Ethelgard engineers who treated physics like a delicate art began to learn the brutalist trade of war. They started building ships that were ugly, ships that were heavy, ships that could take a hit and keep fighting. They named the first of this new class the Valerius, after the human captain whose name they had recovered from the data bursts. But building ships was not enough. They needed to find the others. The signal from the UNS Persistence was a thread, a lifeline leading into the unknown. An expeditionary fleet was assembled, massive in scale, dwarfing the patrol that had found the Indomitable. This time they did not go as conquerors or curious scientists. They went as reinforcements. The journey to the source of the signal took years of superluminal travel. The fleet moved through the dark void between the Milky Way and Andromeda, a region of space that felt heavy with malice. The sensory isolation was maddening for the Ethelgard crews, who were used to the constant chatter of the datanet. Here in the black, there was only silence and the knowledge that something was watching. When they finally arrived at the coordinates, they did not find a ship. They found a graveyard that was also a fortress. Hanging in the void, orbiting a rouge planet that wandered in the darkness between galaxies, was a formation, hundreds of human ships. Some were shattered husks, destroyed in battles fought thousands of years ago. Others were dark, silent, in deep stealth modes. They formed a sphere around the rogue planet. Debris fields of destroyed swarm entities floated in the mix, a testament to a war that had been raging in secret for millennia. The Ethelgard fleet hailed them. For days there was no response. The human ships sat there, menacing, silent monoliths. Then a single channel opened. "Unidentified fleet, you are far from home, turn back." Malcor, aging now, his carapace scarred from the stresses of command, took the comms. "We are the Ethelgard. We saw the Indomitable fall. We carry its legacy. We are not here to intrude. We are here to stand the watch." There was a long pause, a pause that stretched for hours. Then the sensors detected movement. One of the massive shapes, a dreadnought 5 times the size of the Indomitable, began to power up. Lights flickered on along its flank. "The Indomitable fell?" the voice asked. It sounded different, younger, sharper. "It took a swarm hive with it," Malcor replied. "It saved my life, it saved my people." "Captain Valerius was a stubborn old bastard," the voice said, and there was a hint of something unrecognizable to the Ethelgard computer, humor, or perhaps grief. "He owed me a drink." "We have brought supplies," Malcor said. "Energy cells, raw materials, reaction mass, and we have brought our ships. We ask permission to join the formation." The dreadnought drifted closer. "We don't play well with others, alien. We are the dead. We don't have politics. We don't have treaties. We just kill the things that try to eat the universe." "Then teach us," Malcor said. "We are tired of being the prey." The human fleet seemed to confer. Encrypted bursts of data flew between the silent ships. Finally, the dreadnought flashed its running lights, a primitive signal of acknowledgement. "Form up on our port flank," the human commander said. "And keep your shields tight. The swarm gets agitated when they smell fresh meat." As the Ethelgard fleet moved into position, integrating their sleek, high-tech vessels into the jagged, brutal wall of human steel, Malcor looked out at the viewscreen. He saw the rogue planet below. It wasn't just a planet. The surface was covered in structures, domes, habitats, factories. "They aren't just warships," Alaravos whispered, standing. Beside him, "Look at the energy readings from the surface. Geothermal taps, hydroponics, nurseries." Malcor realized the truth then. This wasn't just a military outpost. This was a seed pod. The humans hadn't just sent their warriors to die in the dark. They had sent their future to hide in it. While the galaxy thought them extinct, they had been here in the cold, hard vacuum between galaxies, raising new generations, hardening them in the fires of an endless war, preparing for the day they could return. "They didn't just hold the line," Malcor said, all coloring his voice. "They are building a new one." The UNS Persistence signaled again. "Welcome to the deep guard, Ethelgard. Try not to die on your first day." And in the cold silence of the intergalactic void, the Ethelgard and the humans stood together, a wall of metal and will against the encroaching night. The dead warship had refused to die, and in doing so it had breathed new life into a galaxy that had forgotten how to fight. The universe was vast and dark and full of terrors. But as Malcor watched the human dreadnoughts vent plasma and prepare for the next wave, he knew one thing with absolute certainty: the dark was afraid of them.